Welcome to Sleep Facts. Kick back, relax, and fall asleep to these historic tales. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. The Great Pyramid's impossible precision. The first light of dawn spills across the Giza Plateau, turning the limestone sands to gold. There it stands, the Great Pyramid, not simply a monument, but an enduring riddle cast in stone. For over 4,500 years it has stood against desert winds, the encroaching sands, and the rise and fall of countless empires. It was built during the reign of Pharaoh Khufu, around 2560 BCE, in an era when Egypt's Old Kingdom was at the height of its power. At its completion, the pyramid soared 481 feet into the air, its outer casing of polished Tura limestone gleaming so brightly in the sun that it could be seen from miles away. It was the tallest man-made structure on Earth for more than 3,800 years. What is most baffling is not only its size, some 2.3 million stone blocks, with an estimated total mass of 6.5 million tons, but the staggering precision with which it was constructed. The four sides of the base are aligned almost perfectly with the cardinal directions, deviating by less than 1/20th of a degree. The base itself is nearly perfectly level, with a margin of error of just a fraction of an inch across 13 acres, a feat that would challenge even modern construction crews armed with lasers and GPS. How was such precision achieved with the tools of the time? Ancient Egyptians had copper chisels, stone hammers, and wooden sledges, no steel, no cranes, no pulleys. Mainstream archaeology suggests the use of massive ramps to haul blocks into place. These ramps could have been straight, zigzagging, or wrapped around the structure. Yet each proposed design has its problems. A straight ramp long enough to reach the top would require more material than the pyramid itself. A spiral ramp would obscure the structure's faces and make alignment nearly impossible. Inside, the mystery deepens. The so-called King's Chamber, situated near the pyramid's heart, is constructed from massive granite blocks quarried in Aswan, more than 500 miles to the south. Each block weighs up to 80 tons. These were transported along the Nile and somehow lifted into place hundreds of feet above ground level. Above the chamber is a series of 5 granite, relieving, chambers, designed to distribute the immense weight of stone pressing down from above, an engineering solution so advanced it is still respected by architects today. Then there are the curious mathematical relationships hidden in the pyramid's dimensions. The ratio of its height to the perimeter of its base is nearly equal to 2 pi, suggesting an awareness of this mathematical constant long before it was formally recorded. Some researchers also claim it encodes the golden ratio and even the Earth's dimensions, though mainstream Egyptology tends to regard these as coincidences. Equally perplexing is its purpose. No mummy was found within. The sarcophagus inside the king's chamber is empty, its lid missing. Some scholars argue it was looted in antiquity, others believe it was never intended as a tomb. Alternative theories, ranging from astronomical observatory to giant energy transmitter, abound, though they remain speculative. What is undeniable is the endurance of the structure. Even stripped of its outer casing stones, even battered by earthquakes and centuries of human interference, it stands as the only surviving wonder of the ancient world. Each year, it draws millions of visitors who stand at its base, gaze upward, and feel the same mixture of awe and bafflement. In the quiet of the desert night, when the tourists have gone and the air cools under the stars, the pyramid seems to hum with presence. It is a reminder that the ancient world was capable of feats that challenge our sense of what is possible, and that perhaps the greatest mystery is not how it was built, but the mind that conceived it. The Voynich Manuscript. In a climate-controlled vault at Yale University's Binek Rare Book and Manuscript Library, under glass and dim light, lies a single volume unlike any other, a book that has defied the greatest code breakers of the modern age. Bound in limp vellum, its 240 pages are covered in an elegant, looping script, a script that matches no known language, no alphabet, no cipher. The ink is faded to a soft brown, yet the handwriting is crisp, deliberate, consistent, as though the author worked with care over many months or years. The manuscript takes its name from Wilfrid Voynich, a Polish antiquarian bookseller who purchased it in 1912 from a Jesuit college in Italy. Inside, Voynich found not only text, but hundreds of illustrations. Delicate plants that resemble no flora on Earth, astronomical charts filled with unknown constellations, naked women bathing in strange green pools connected by pipe-like conduits, and what appear to be pharmaceutical diagrams with tiny jars and herbal arrangements. Carbon dating of the vellum places its creation between 1404 and 1438, making it a genuine medieval artifact rather than a modern hoax. The ink, too, is consistent with the period. Yet the deeper one studies it, the stranger it becomes. The script has patterns, repeating word structures, statistical properties similar to real languages, but none that match any known linguistic family. Cryptographers, including those from World War II and modern NSA code breakers, have failed to decipher it. The illustrations seem to divide the manuscript into thematic sections. Botanical, full-page plant drawings, each paired with blocks of text, yet every plant is a botanical impossibility. Astronomical. Circular diagrams, zodiac-like wheels, and star maps, but with constellations that cannot be matched to our sky. Biological, miniature nude figures, mostly female, engaged in mysterious activities within systems of tubes, baths, and star-shaped pools. Pharmaceutical, rows of jars and containers, accompanied by plant parts, roots, and labeled segments. Theories about its origin are many. Some believe it is an elaborate herbal reference from a lost culture, written in a cipher known only to its author. Others suspect it is a hoax, a meaningless text crafted to baffle and impress, perhaps to sell to a wealthy patron. Yet if it is a hoax, it is a remarkably consistent one. The manuscript's internal linguistic structure is far too sophisticated to be random gibberish. In 2017, a scholar proposed that it might be written in a form of Proto-Romance language, heavily abbreviated, and disguised by unique script. Others suggest it could be glossolalia, automatic writing. Produced in a trance-like state, perhaps for mystical purposes. Artificial intelligence models have attempted to match the symbols to known languages, but none have cracked its code. The mystery deepens when one considers the manuscript's journey. Before Voynich, it may have passed through the hands of Holy Roman Emperor Rudolph II in the late 16th century, who reportedly paid 600 gold ducats for it, an enormous sum, suggesting it was already regarded as a rare treasure. Letters found with the book hinted that it had been studied by 17th-century alchemists and Jesuit scholars, none of whom claimed to understand it. Today, high-resolution scans are available online for anyone to study. Thousands of amateur and professional cryptographers pore over it, convinced that the next insight will be the one to break its code. Yet the book remains stubbornly silent, its pages as opaque as the day they were penned. In the hushed air of the Binek Library, visitors lean in close to see the fine brushstrokes, the strange looping letters, the bizarre flowers blooming in impossible colors. And in that moment, they join a centuries-old chain of minds. Each captivated, each certain they are on the brink of understanding, before realizing the manuscript has once again slipped through their grasp. 3. The Antikythera Mechanism. It began with a storm. The year was 1900, and a group of Greek sponge divers took shelter on the island of Antikythera, halfway between Crete and the Peloponnese. When the seas calmed, they descended into the clear waters, and stumbled upon the broken remains of a Roman-era shipwreck. Bronze statues, amphorae, and marble busts emerged from the deep. But one object, crusted with centuries of corrosion, looked unremarkable at first. It would turn out to be the most extraordinary find of all. That object, later split into over 80 fragments, would become known as the Antikythera mechanism. When cleaned and examined, its corroded bronze plates revealed tiny interlocking gears, some with teeth finer than those in 18th-century clocks. Embedded inscriptions in ancient Greek hinted at astronomical calculations. It was quickly apparent that this was no ordinary artifact. The mechanism, dating to around 100 BCE, was an analog computer, a hand-cranked device capable of predicting the positions of the sun, moon, and even the timing of eclipses decades into the future. Using a system of at least 30 bronze gears, it could model the irregular motion of the moon, accounting for its elliptical orbit, display the zodiac, and track the timing of the Olympic Games. The sheer craftsmanship of the gears is staggering. Some have as many as 223 precisely cut teeth, crafted without modern machine tools. For decades after its discovery, scholars believed gearwork of this precision did not appear until medieval clockmakers in the 14th century, over 1,400 years later. X-ray tomography in the early 2000s allowed researchers to peer inside the calcified fragments without damaging them. They uncovered hidden inscriptions, a sort of user manual etched into the bronze, describing how to operate the dials and interpret the results. The front face of the device displayed a zodiac calendar with pointers for the sun and moon, while the back had spiral dials tracking eclipse cycles and the 4-year Olympiad schedule. The origins of the mechanism remain an enigma. Was it crafted by a lone genius, perhaps influenced by the teachings of Archimedes? Or was it part of a lost tradition of advanced Hellenistic engineering, its peers long since destroyed? If such technology existed, why did it vanish from history for over a millennium? The shipwreck that carried it was likely a Roman vessel hauling Greek treasures to Italy. Some scholars suspect it may have been looted from Rhodes, a center of astronomical study at the time. But without other examples, it stands alone, a single, fragile survivor of a technological lineage we barely understand. Today, the Antikythera mechanism rests in the National Archaeological Museum in Athens. Behind its glass case, the corroded gears still bear silent witness to a forgotten mastery. Visitors see only fragments, yet through digital reconstructions, we glimpse what it once was, a bronze machine of exquisite precision, built in an age we thought too primitive to conceive it. It is, in a sense, a time traveler, an artifact that should not exist, whispering of knowledge lost to centuries, and raising a question historians still cannot answer. What else did the ancients know that we have yet to rediscover? Göbekli Tepe. The southeastern plains of modern-day Turkey seem an unlikely place to find the oldest known temple on Earth. Yet here, under a dusty hill once thought to be nothing more than a natural rise, archaeologists uncovered a site that rewrote the timeline of human civilization. In 1994, German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt was surveying the area near the city of Unlerfer when he noticed fragments of ancient stone protruding from the ground. Local farmers had long been aware of the stones, often striking them while plowing, but no one suspected their true significance. Schmidt quickly realized that the mound, known in Turkish as Göbekli Tepe, or Potbelly Hill, was man-made. Excavations revealed massive T-shaped limestone pillars arranged in circular enclosures. Some of these pillars stood over 16 feet tall and weighed as much as 20 tons. Many were intricately carved with reliefs of animals, lions, scorpions, snakes, vultures, wild boars, along with abstract symbols whose meanings remain unknown. What stunned researchers was not only the artistry, but the age. Radiocarbon dating showed the site was built around 9600 BCE, more than 11,000 years ago. This was a time when humanity was supposed to be living in small nomadic bands, just beginning to experiment with agriculture. The conventional narrative had been that farming came first, followed by permanent settlements, which then led to large-scale religious structures. Göbekli Tepe flipped that story upside down. Here was monumental architecture predating agriculture by thousands of years, suggesting that it may have been communal religion, not farming, that first brought people together in large groups. The site consists of multiple stone circles, each with a pair of massive central pillars surrounded by smaller ones. Archaeologists believe the central pillars represent stylized human figures, their sides engraved with arms and hands, facing each other across the enclosure. The animal carvings may have symbolic, spiritual, or clan-based meanings, though no definitive interpretation exists. Another mystery is why the site was buried. At some point, around 8000 BCE, the people who used Göbekli Tepe deliberately filled it in with thousands of tons of rubble, preserving it almost perfectly for millennia. The reason remains unknown. Was it an act of reverence, a ritual closure, or a response to some cultural shift? Adding to the intrigue, the builders had no metal tools or beasts of burden. Moving and shaping multi-ton stones would have required incredible coordination and manpower, yet there is no evidence of permanent dwellings nearby, suggesting that people may have traveled from far away to participate in rituals here, much like a prehistoric pilgrimage site. Excavation has only touched a fraction of the mound. Ground-penetrating radar suggests there may be dozens more enclosures still buried. Each one could contain carvings and alignments that deepen or challenge our understanding of the site's purpose. Today, Göbekli Tepe stands as a reminder that human culture may be far older and more complex than we imagined. In the shadow of its ancient pillars, one cannot help but feel the weight of a forgotten world, a time when, at the dawn of civilization, people gathered not to plant fields, but to carve stone, tell stories, and perhaps seek the favor of gods whose names we will never know. The Phaistos Disc. In the summer of 1908, Italian archaeologist Luigi Pernia was excavating the ruins of the Minoan palace of Phaistos, on the island of Crete. The palace itself dated to around 1700 BCE, a center of the flourishing Minoan civilization. But buried deep in its storage rooms, he uncovered an artifact unlike anything else from the ancient world, a small clay disc covered on both sides with strange symbols pressed into its surface. The disc, roughly 6 inches in diameter, is made of fine clay, perfectly round and flat. Both sides are covered in a spiral of tiny pictograms, 241 symbols in total, divided into 61 separate words, or groups. What makes it especially unusual is how those symbols were created. Each was impressed into the wet clay using small, carved stamps, like a form of printing. This is the earliest known use of movable type in human history, predating Gutenberg's printing press by over 3,000 years. The symbols themselves depict a wide range of images: human heads in feathered headdresses, fish, birds, flowers, tools, and abstract shapes. They are unlike any known writing system of the ancient world, though a few symbols bear superficial resemblance to Cretan hieroglyphs or Linear A, both undeciphered scripts of the Minoans. And that's the heart of the problem: no one can read it. Without a Rosetta Stone to compare it to, the language of the Phaistos Disc remains a total mystery. Some scholars believe it's a form of writing, possibly a hymn, legal code, or ritual text. Others think it could be a game board, a calendar, or even a magical talisman. Theories abound. Some have suggested the disc was not made on Crete at all, but brought from a distant land, perhaps Anatolia or the Levant. Others propose it's a one-of-a-kind object, made for a very specific and now forgotten purpose. Because no other artifact like it has ever been found, it's impossible to say whether it represents a whole writing tradition or a single creative experiment. The Phaistos Disc also raises the question of how and why such an advanced stamping technique appeared so early, and then vanished. In theory, the technology to mass-produce texts could have transformed record-keeping, trade, and administration in the ancient Aegean. Instead, the idea seems to have died with the disc, never to reappear in that form until millennia later. Today, the disc is displayed in the Heraklion Archaeological Museum in Crete. Its reddish clay, baked hard by time, still carries the spiral of symbols, a frozen message from the Bronze Age, waiting for a reader who may never come. Visitors stare at it in frustration and wonder, realizing they are looking at a text that may have been meant to be read aloud, sung, or prayed, but whose voice has been silenced for over 3,500 years. It is, in a sense, the ancient world's sealed envelope. And until someone breaks its code, the Phaistos Disc will remain one of archaeology's most tantalizing riddles. The Great Zimbabwe Ruins. In the rolling hills of southeastern Africa, far from the ancient centers of Egypt or Mesopotamia, lie the remains of one of the most impressive stone cities ever built on the continent, a place that once bustled with life, wealth, and power, but whose origins were long denied by colonial scholars. The site, known today as Great Zimbabwe, sits in modern-day Zimbabwe and dates to between the 11th and 15th centuries CE. At its height, it was the political and economic heart of a vast kingdom that controlled trade routes stretching from the interior of Africa to the Indian Ocean coast. Gold, ivory, and cattle were the sources of its wealth, and its merchants dealt with traders from as far away as Persia, India, and China. What makes Great Zimbabwe so remarkable is its architecture. Built entirely without mortar, its stone walls snake across the hills in graceful curves, some rising over 30 feet high and stretching for hundreds of feet. The most famous of these is the Great Enclosure, an elliptical wall enclosing a massive space that may have been used for royal ceremonies, feasts, or political gatherings. Within the enclosure stands a towering conical stone structure, the purpose of which is still debated. The craftsmanship is extraordinary. The builders carefully cut granite blocks from nearby quarries and fit them together so tightly that even centuries later, the walls remain stable. Archaeologists estimate that the city covered nearly 300 acres and supported perhaps 18,000 people, a major urban center by medieval African standards. When European explorers and colonialists first encountered the ruins in the late 19th century, they refused to believe that local African peoples could have built them. Instead, they attributed the city to mythical foreign builders, Phoenicians, Arabs, even the lost tribes of Israel. These ideas were not based on evidence, but on deeply racist assumptions. It wasn't until the mid-20th century, after rigorous archaeological research, that scholars conclusively proved that Great Zimbabwe was built by the ancestors of the Shona people, a thriving African civilization with a sophisticated political and economic system. Artifacts found on the site tell a story of wide-reaching connections. Chinese porcelain, Persian glass, and Arabian coins have all been unearthed here, proof that the kingdom's wealth flowed from a global trade network. The city's decline around the 15th century may have been caused by environmental pressures, overgrazing, deforestation, and a shift in trade routes to the north. Yet mysteries remain. We still do not know the exact function of the conical tower, or the full details of the city's political structure. Oral traditions remember Great Zimbabwe as a royal city, a place of kings and ancestral spirits. Its massive walls, rising silently from the grasslands, speak of a power and confidence that colonial history tried to erase, but which endures in stone. Today, Great Zimbabwe is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and a symbol of national pride. It is a reminder that the story of civilization is not the property of any one part of the world, and that even in the heart of Africa, people were building cities of stone that could stand the test of time. The Antikythera mechanism. In the spring of 1900, a group of Greek sponge divers, sheltering from a storm near the tiny island of Antikythera, decided to dive along the rocky seabed. At a depth of around 150 feet, they found not fish or sponges, but the remains of an ancient shipwreck, a cargo vessel that had sunk more than 2,000 years earlier. Among the statues, amphorae, and other artifacts was a lump of corroded bronze and wood that looked, at first, like nothing important. But it would turn out to be one of the most extraordinary discoveries in the history of archaeology. When researchers began cleaning the encrusted object, they realized it contained a system of bronze gears, dozens of them, locked together in an incredibly complex arrangement. This was the Antikythera mechanism, a device so advanced that it would not be matched again in Europe for over 1,000 years. Dating to around 100 BCE, the mechanism was essentially an ancient analog computer, designed to calculate the positions of the sun, moon, and planets. By turning a hand crank, the user could simulate the movements of the heavens for any date in the past or future. The front face had two dials, one showing the solar calendar and the position of the zodiac, the other showing the phases of the moon. On the back were more dials, including one that predicted eclipses with stunning accuracy. The level of craftsmanship was staggering. The surviving fragments contain at least 30 precision-cut bronze gears, some with teeth smaller than a millimeter. The maker not only understood astronomy and mathematics, but also had the metallurgical skill to create delicate, perfectly meshing parts. For centuries, historians had believed that geared mechanisms of this complexity didn't appear until medieval clockmaking, yet here was proof that the ancient Greeks had mastered them long before. The device also contained Greek inscriptions, which acted like an instruction manual. Deciphered over decades, these texts revealed that the mechanism tracked the cycles of the Olympiad, meaning it could have been used to plan the timing of the ancient Olympic Games. How did such technology appear in the ancient world? And why was it lost? One theory is that the mechanism was part of a tradition of advanced instruments created by Hellenistic engineers like Archimedes, but that most were destroyed when the great centers of learning, such as the Library of Alexandria, fell to war and fire. Another idea is that the mechanism was always a rare, one-off creation, built for a wealthy patron who could afford such a marvel. What's certain is that it changes how we think about ancient science. The Antikythera mechanism shows that the Greeks were not only philosophers and poets, but also engineers capable of precision technology we once thought impossible for their time. Today, the corroded fragments are kept in the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, where researchers continue to scan and model them. The Antikythera mechanism. It began with a storm. The year was 1900, and a group of Greek sponge divers took shelter on the island of Antikythera, halfway between Crete and the Peloponnese. When the seas calmed, they descended into the clear waters, and stumbled upon the broken remains of a Roman-era shipwreck. Bronze statues, amphorae, and marble busts emerged from the deep. But one object, crusted with centuries of corrosion, looked unremarkable at first. It would turn out to be the most extraordinary find of all. That object, later split into over 80 fragments, would become known as the Antikythera mechanism. When cleaned and examined, its corroded bronze plates revealed tiny interlocking gears, some with teeth finer than those in 18th-century clocks. Embedded inscriptions in ancient Greek hinted at astronomical calculations. It was quickly apparent that this was no ordinary artifact. The mechanism, dating to around 100 BCE, was an analog computer. A hand-crank device capable of predicting the positions of the sun, moon, and even the timing of eclipses decades into the future. Using a system of at least 30 bronze gears, it could model the irregular motion of the moon, accounting for its elliptical orbit, display the zodiac, and track the timing of the Olympic Games. The sheer craftsmanship of the gears is staggering. Some have as many as 223 precisely cut teeth, crafted without modern machine tools. For decades after its discovery, scholars believed gearwork of this precision did not appear until medieval clockmakers in the 14th century, over 1,400 years later. X-ray tomography in the early 2000s allowed researchers to peer inside the calcified fragments without damaging them. They uncovered hidden inscriptions, a sort of user manual etched into the bronze, describing how to operate the dials and interpret the results. The front face of the device displayed a zodiac calendar with pointers for the sun and moon, while the back had spiral dials tracking eclipse cycles and the 4-year Olympiad schedule. The origins of the mechanism remain an enigma. Was it crafted by a lone genius, perhaps influenced by the teachings of Archimedes? Or was it part of a lost tradition of advanced Hellenistic engineering, its peers long since destroyed? If such technology existed, why did it vanish from history for over a millennium? The shipwreck that carried it was likely a Roman vessel hauling Greek treasures to Italy. Some scholars suspect it may have been looted from Rhodes, a center of astronomical study at the time. But without other examples, it stands alone, a single, fragile survivor of a technological lineage we barely understand. Today, the Antikythera mechanism rests in the National Archaeological Museum in Athens. Behind its glass case, the corroded gears still bear silent witness to a forgotten mastery. Visitors see only fragments, yet through digital reconstructions, we glimpse what it once was, a bronze machine of exquisite precision, built in an age we thought too primitive to conceive it. It is, in a sense, a time traveler, an artifact that should not exist, whispering of knowledge lost to centuries, and raising a question historians still cannot answer. What else did the ancients know that we have yet to rediscover? The Baghdad Battery. In 1938, in the suburbs of Baghdad, an Iraqi archaeologist named Wilhelm Koenig stumbled upon something strange in the basement of the National Museum of Iraq. It was a simple clay jar, about 6 inches tall, with a narrow neck sealed by a bitumen plug. Inside the jar was a copper cylinder, made from a rolled-up sheet of copper, and within that, an iron rod. The iron showed signs of corrosion, and the copper bore the green patina of age. The jar dated to somewhere between 250 BCE and 250 CE, the era of the Parthian Empire. At first glance, the artifact seemed unremarkable. But Koenig noticed something unusual. The components looked suspiciously like parts of a galvanic cell, the basic form of a battery. When reconstructed and filled with an acidic liquid, such as vinegar or lemon juice, the device could indeed produce a small electrical current. This sparked a flurry of speculation. Could it be that 2,000 years ago, people in Mesopotamia were generating electricity? If so, what were they using it for? Some suggested the Baghdad battery might have been used for electroplating, applying a thin layer of precious metal onto jewelry or objects. Others thought it might have been used for medicinal purposes, delivering mild electric shocks. But here's where the mystery deepens. No other known devices from the period resemble this jar. There is no written record from the Parthian or Sasanian periods that describes electricity, galvanic cells, or electroplating. And despite multiple jars being found in similar styles, none have been discovered in direct association with anything that might explain their purpose. Skeptics argue that the Baghdad battery may not have been a battery at all. The copper cylinder might have been a container for papyrus scrolls, or a protective sheath for delicate objects. The iron rod could have been used to hold a lid in place. Without concrete evidence of electrical use, the battery theory remains speculative. Still, experiments conducted in the 20th century showed that the jar, when assembled and filled with acid, can produce between 0.5 and 1 volt of electricity. This is too small to power machinery, but enough for electrochemical reactions. Could there have been a forgotten craft or ritual in which such devices played a role? The artifact survived the 2003 looting of the Iraq Museum, though many others were lost. It remains one of archaeology's most curious finds, an object that seems to suggest a level of technological experimentation far ahead of its time, or perhaps simply a case of modern minds projecting their own inventions backward onto the past. What's certain is that, whether or not it ever powered anything, the Baghdad battery reminds us that ancient people were tinkerers and experimenters, not just passive recipients of tradition. And if there's one thing history teaches us, it's that the past still holds many volts worth of surprises. The Nazca Lines. In the arid plains of southern Peru, stretching for miles across the desert floor, are vast drawings etched into the earth. These are the Nazca Lines, a network of giant geoglyphs created by removing the dark, oxidized stones on the surface to reveal the pale soil beneath. Some are straight lines running for kilometers. Others form geometric shapes, while many depict animals and plants, a monkey with a spiraling tail, a spider with outstretched legs, a hummingbird mid-flight, and even what appears to be a human-like figure waving. The sheer scale of the lines is staggering. Some figures measure more than 1,200 feet across, and the largest straight lines stretch over 10 miles. They were created between roughly 500 BCE and 500 CE by the Nazca culture, which thrived in the region long before the Inca Empire rose. But here's the enduring mystery: why make something so massive that it can only be fully appreciated from the air, in an era when flight didn't exist? On the ground, the lines are barely noticeable. From above, they are unmistakable. Archaeologists have proposed several theories. Some believe the lines were part of religious ceremonies, perhaps created as offerings to the gods, who would see them from the sky. This fits with the Nazca's known reliance on agriculture in a harsh environment, where rainfall was scarce and water management was a matter of survival. The shapes could have been intended to call down rain or to honor deities linked to fertility and the heavens. Another theory suggests they were linked to astronomy. Certain lines align with the solstices and the movements of celestial bodies, leading some researchers to believe the desert was a vast observatory. The figures, then, might have had both symbolic and calendrical purposes. In the 20th century, more speculative ideas emerged, including the famous theory popularized by Erich von Däniken that the lines were landing strips for ancient astronauts. This, while dramatic, is not taken seriously by mainstream scholars, who point out that the thin, shallow etchings could never withstand the weight of any aircraft, real or imagined. What's perhaps just as mysterious is how the lines have survived for over 1,000 years. The Nazca Desert's extreme aridity, lack of wind, and stable climate have preserved them almost perfectly. Yet modern threats, including urban expansion, mining, and even careless tourists, now endanger them. In 2014, Greenpeace activists inadvertently damaged part of the hummingbird figure by walking across it during a protest, highlighting how fragile the lines really are. Today, drones, satellites, and ground surveys have revealed hundreds more geoglyphs than were known just decades ago. Some are so faint they can only be detected by high-resolution imaging, suggesting the desert still hides many undiscovered designs. Whatever their purpose, the Nazca Lines represent a colossal investment of labor and coordination, tens of thousands of hours spent etching art no one at the time could fully see. They are a silent message from an ancient culture to the sky itself, one that still whispers across the sands after 15 centuries. The Piri Reis Map. In 1929, while cleaning out a storage room in the Topkapi Palace of Istanbul, a group of scholars discovered an old, rolled-up parchment. When they unrolled it, they realized they were looking at one of the most astonishing maps in history. It was drawn on gazelle skin in 1513 by an Ottoman admiral named Piri Reis, and it depicted parts of the world that Europeans of his time had only just begun to explore, and perhaps some places they shouldn't have known about at all. The map covers the western coasts of Europe and Africa, and the eastern coastline of South America. Incredibly, the level of detail in certain regions, especially along the Brazilian coast, is far more accurate than what most European maps of the period showed. But what really caught researchers' attention was the bottom portion of the map, which seems to show a stretch of land along the southernmost edge of the Atlantic. Some interpreted this as Antarctica. Nearly 3 centuries before its official discovery in 1820. If it truly represents Antarctica, the Piri Reis map raises 2 perplexing questions. How could 16th-century mapmakers have known it was there? And why does it seem to show the continent's coastline without its thick ice sheet, as it would have appeared thousands of years ago? Piri Reis himself left some clues. In notes on the map, he wrote that he had compiled it using around 20 older charts, some dating back to the time of Alexander the Great. He claimed these sources came from ancient mariners and earlier civilizations, including maps captured from Christopher Columbus himself. This would explain why some areas are drawn with Renaissance-era precision, while others appear less accurate or oddly distorted. The Antarctica claim remains controversial. Many historians and cartographers argue that the southern land mass is simply an exaggerated depiction of South America extended too far south. A common mistake in early mapmaking. They point out that projecting modern interpretations onto old maps can lead to misleading conclusions. Others, however, insist that the resemblance is too uncanny to ignore, suggesting that remnants of an ancient seafaring culture, perhaps the Phoenicians, or an even older, lost civilization, passed down geographic knowledge long before the age of exploration. What is beyond dispute is that the Piri Reis map reflects a blending of knowledge from multiple cultures, Islamic scholars, European explorers, and possibly far older navigators. It was an artifact of the great information exchanges that occurred during the early modern period, when the Ottoman Empire was a hub of trade, learning, and cartography. Today, the surviving fragment of the map, roughly 1/3 of the original, is kept under controlled conditions at the Topkapi Palace Museum. Much of it remains a puzzle, both for what it reveals and for the tantalizing hints of what the missing sections might have shown. Whether it truly contains evidence of a forgotten age of global exploration or simply the clever compilation of the best maps of its time, the Piri Reis map stands as a reminder that history is often written on the edges of parchment, where fact, speculation, and mystery blur together. The Cochno Stone. In the quiet Scottish village of Baffle, west of Glasgow, there lies, mostly hidden from sight, one of the largest and most mysterious sets of prehistoric carvings in all of Europe. Known as the Cochno Stone, this massive sandstone slab measures roughly 43 feet by 26 feet and is covered with an intricate network of spirals, circles, grooves, and dozens of deep, cup marks, small, round depressions carved into the rock. First recorded in 1887 by the local minister, Reverend James Harvey, the Cochno Stone is believed to date back over 5,000 years, placing it in the late Neolithic or early Bronze Age. The carvings are remarkably well preserved for their age, and archaeologists note their similarity to other petroglyphs found across the British Isles, as well as in Spain, Italy, and even parts of Scandinavia. This suggests the existence of a shared symbolic language among early European cultures, one we no longer understand. Some researchers speculate that the patterns might be early maps, perhaps depicting rivers, settlements, or territorial boundaries. Others believe they could have astronomical purposes, with the rings and grooves representing planetary or lunar cycles. A more spiritual theory suggests that the spirals were part of ritual activity, perhaps marking sacred spaces or recording mythological stories. In the mid-20th century, the stone became a local curiosity, attracting visitors, and unfortunately, vandals. By 1965, archaeologists decided to rebury the entire slab under a thick layer of soil to protect it. It lay hidden for 50 years until 2015, when a team from the University of Glasgow uncovered it temporarily for study. Using drones and 3D scanning, they created a high-resolution digital model of the carvings before recovering the stone once again. Even with modern imaging, the meaning of the Cochno Stone remains locked away, a silent message from an ancient culture whose language is forever lost. In a way, it's not just a mystery carved into stone, it's a mystery deliberately sleeping beneath our feet. The Antikythera shipwreck's other mysteries. The Antikythera mechanism, the intricate bronze device recovered from the seabed in 1901, often steals the spotlight. But the shipwreck it came from is itself an archaeological enigma. The wreck was first discovered by sponge divers off the Greek island of Antikythera, at a depth of about 150 feet. The divers found themselves in a surreal underwater graveyard of ancient artifacts, marble and bronze statues, luxury glassware, amphorae filled with wine and oil, and ornate jewelry. Dating of the wreck places it around 70 to 60 BCE, likely a Roman-era merchant vessel traveling from the eastern Mediterranean toward Italy. The cargo suggests it was carrying elite goods, perhaps a gift for a high-ranking Roman family, or part of the spoils from a military campaign. Yet there are anomalies. Divers in modern expeditions have found anchor stocks far too large for the known wreck, suggesting either that more than one ship went down in the same spot or that a much larger vessel was involved. The seafloor in this area is treacherous, with steep drop-offs and strong currents, leading some to theorize that a violent storm smashed multiple ships against the cliffs at once. The presence of the Antikythera mechanism adds another layer of intrigue. The device itself is a marvel of ancient engineering, a complex assembly of bronze gears that could predict eclipses, track planetary positions, and even account for the irregularities of the moon's orbit. Was it aboard as cargo, or was it the personal property of someone on the ship? Was the vessel transporting it to a Roman patron, or had it been salvaged from somewhere even older? Ongoing underwater excavations have continued to uncover human remains, spear points, more ceramics, and fragments of furniture. Each new find expands the mystery. The wreck isn't just the story of one ship, it feels like the frozen moment of a catastrophic event, possibly involving multiple vessels, that took precious cargo and people down into the depths forever. The Sajama Lines. In the shadow of Sajama, Bolivia's highest mountain, lies one of the largest geoglyphic networks on Earth, yet it's almost completely unknown outside of specialized archaeological circles. These are the Sajama Lines, thousands upon thousands of perfectly straight paths etched into the high-altitude plains. The lines crisscross the arid ground for an estimated total length of 10,000 miles, longer than the Great Wall of China, and yet they remain largely unstudied. Each line is about 3 to 10 feet wide, created by removing the dark oxidized rock on the surface to reveal lighter earth beneath. What's remarkable is their straightness. The lines do not curve or deviate, even when crossing hills, rivers, or rugged terrain. Radiocarbon dating is difficult, but the lines are thought to be at least several hundred years old, possibly much older. They appear to connect sacred sites, ancient burial towers called chulpas, ceremonial shrines, and pre-Columbian settlements. Some archaeologists believe they were ritual pathways, perhaps used for processions or pilgrimages. Others suggest they may have astronomical significance, aligning with solstice sunrises or other celestial events. Unlike Peru's Nazca lines, which form animal and geometric shapes, the Sajama lines are purely linear. From ground level, they are nearly invisible, blending into the desert. Only from the air does their immense scale and precision become apparent, yet the indigenous Aymara people have known of them for generations, weaving them into local legends. No one knows who first made them, or why such monumental effort was invested in creating thousands of miles of perfectly straight paths that lead to nowhere and everywhere at once. The Temple of Jupiter at Baalbek. In the Lebanese city of Baalbek, the ruins of the Roman Temple of Jupiter tower above the landscape. Even in decay, the scale is overwhelming. 6 surviving columns rise more than 60 feet into the sky, each a single massive piece of stone. But it's what lies beneath that baffles engineers and historians alike. The temple platform sits atop a foundation of cyclopean stone blocks, each weighing hundreds of tons. The most famous, the Stone of the Pregnant Woman, measures about 70 by 14 by 13 feet and weighs over 1,000 tons. Even more astonishing, in a nearby quarry archaeologists have identified a partially cut block estimated at over 1,600 tons, the largest known worked stone in human history. Moving stones of this size today would require specialized heavy-lift cranes and transport vehicles. How an ancient civilization cut, moved, and precisely positioned them remains one of archaeology's great engineering mysteries. The Romans, for all their skill, left no record explaining the process, and some evidence suggests that the base platform predates Roman construction entirely. Why use such massive stones at all? One theory is that the sheer weight made the structure earthquake-resistant. Another suggests that the stones held ceremonial or symbolic importance, projecting the power of the builders. There are even fringe theories proposing lost advanced technology, though mainstream archaeologists attribute it to remarkable human engineering and organization. Whoever the original builders were, they left behind a puzzle in stone, one so massive that it may never truly be moved or solved. The Hypogeum of Ħal-Saflieni. In the heart of the small Mediterranean island of Malta, beneath the unassuming modern streets of Paula, lies a hidden world carved out over 5,000 years ago. It is a place where the living once descended into the earth to commune with the dead. A place where shadows and silence seem to hum with ancient secrets. This is the Hypogeum of Ħal-Saflieni, one of the most extraordinary and baffling prehistoric sites on Earth. The name, Hypogeum, simply means underground chamber in Greek, but the structure here is anything but simple. Discovered entirely by accident in 1902, it is an immense, labyrinthine complex of halls, passageways, and chambers dug into the island's soft limestone, a kind of subterranean necropolis dating back to Malta's Temple period, between 3600 and 2500 BCE. The man credited with the discovery, Emmanuel Maigret, was a Jesuit priest and archaeologist who was called in after workers, attempting to dig a cistern for a new housing development, broke through into an underground void. What they found was not just a single cavern, but an entire 3-level structure extending deep beneath the surface. The Hypogeum's first level seems almost humble, low ceilings, small rooms, a winding passage. But as one descends, the architecture grows more elaborate, with smooth, curved walls and intricate patterns carved into the stone. The second level features the most famous chamber of all, the Oracle Room. Its walls are decorated with red ochre spirals and dotted patterns, the only known prehistoric wall paintings on the Maltese Islands. The room is small, but its acoustic properties are uncanny. A deep male voice spoken inside resonates throughout the entire structure at a frequency of about 110 Hz, an effect that may have been used intentionally during rituals. The third level plunges into darkness and mystery. Here, archaeologists found no decorations, no artifacts, and no natural light. The floor plan suggests storage or ceremonial spaces, but their original purpose remains elusive. Perhaps most striking is the scale of the site. The Hypogeum covers about 500 square meters and could have held hundreds of people at a time. When the excavations began in earnest in the early 20th century, workers unearthed the remains of more than 7,000 individuals. These skeletons were stacked and arranged in patterns, suggesting deliberate burial practices. Some skulls showed unusual elongation, not from artificial cranial deformation but from natural bone structure, an anomaly that has fed speculation about distinct genetic groups or symbolic roles in ancient society. The artifacts found within the Hypogeum paint a picture of a complex, spiritually rich culture. Beads, shell pendants, flint tools, and small statuettes, including the famous Sleeping Lady, a clay figure of a corpulent woman reclining on her side, hint at a belief system centered on fertility, death, and rebirth. The presence of imported objects such as obsidian from Sicily shows that Malta was part of a far-reaching trade network long before the pyramids of Egypt were built. But perhaps the most enduring mystery is how this colossal monument was built. The people of Malta at the time had no metal tools, no advanced lifting equipment, and yet they carved through solid limestone with astonishing precision, hauling out thousands of tons of rock, shaping columns and doorways, and aligning spaces for both sound and symbolic meaning. And then there are the stories, the whispers of stranger things. In the early days after its discovery, before the site was carefully managed, local children were said to have played inside its passageways. A persistent legend tells of a group of school children who wandered too far in, and never came out. According to the tale, their voices were heard faintly through nearby wells for days before fading into silence. While no official records confirm this, the story has become part of the Hypogeum's eerie lore. Even in modern times, visitors have reported sensations of dizziness, altered perception, and disorientation inside, particularly in the oracle room. Some scientists suggest this may be due to the low-frequency resonance affecting human brain activity. Others see it as proof that the chamber was deliberately engineered to induce trance-like states. Today, the Hypogeum is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and one of Malta's most carefully preserved treasures. To protect its delicate microclimate, which keeps its Neolithic paintings from fading. Only 80 visitors are allowed inside per day, and all must follow strict time limits. Walking through it now feels like stepping into another world, one where every shadow could conceal an ancient memory. In the end, the Hypogeum of Ħal-Saflieni remains as much a riddle as it was the day it was found. Who built it? What rituals took place in its depths? And why, after centuries of use, was it sealed off and abandoned? Perhaps the answers lie still beneath the limestone floors, in chambers yet undiscovered, or perhaps they were always meant to remain in the dark. The Phaistos Disc. In the summer of 1908, under the blazing Cretan sun, Italian archaeologist Luigi Pernia was working deep in the ruins of an ancient Minoan palace at Phaistos, a site already rich with the dust of 4,000 years. The dig had yielded pottery, tools, and fragments of walls, the everyday debris of a long-dead civilization, but nothing could have prepared the team for what emerged from the dark earth that day. It was a small, unassuming clay disc, no bigger than a man's hand, its surface impressed with an array of strange symbols arranged in a perfect spiral. At first glance, it seemed almost playful, a circular puzzle, each symbol a miniature work of art, running men, fish, birds, flowers, shields, and tools. But as the team brushed away the last clinging grains of soil, it became clear that they were looking at something unique. Unlike anything else found in Minoan Crete, or anywhere else in the ancient world, The Phaistos Disc seemed to speak in a language no one had ever seen, a message from a lost voice, pressed into clay some 3,700 years ago. The disc itself is about 15 centimeters in diameter and just over a centimeter thick. Its two sides are each covered with a continuous spiral of stamped symbols, 242 impressions in total, arranged into 61 groups, separated by small vertical lines as if denoting words or phrases. What's remarkable is the way these symbols were created. Each was stamped into the wet clay using individual seals, meaning the disc represents one of the earliest known uses of movable type, a printing technology that would not be reinvented in Europe until the 15th century. From the moment it was uncovered, the Phaistos disc posed more questions than it answered. What do the symbols mean? Who created them? And why has nothing else like it ever been found? The Minoan civilization was literate. We know they used two scripts, now called Linear A and Linear B, but the disc's markings match neither. Linear B, later deciphered in the 1950s, turned out to be an early form of Greek, but Linear A remains unreadable. The disc's symbols seem related to neither, suggesting that it may represent a wholly independent writing system, one that vanished with its makers. The symbols themselves are beautiful and oddly specific: a plumed head, a sailing ship, a cat's head, a beehive, a lyre, even what appears to be a child's head. Some are simple geometric shapes, others richly detailed. Were they phonetic characters, like letters? Or were they logograms, each standing for an entire word or concept? One theory proposes that the disc could be a hymn or prayer, perhaps a dedication to a deity or a ceremonial chant. The spiral arrangement may have been more than decorative, symbolizing cycles of life, the sun's path, or the labyrinth so central to Cretan myth. Another striking detail is the disc's remarkable state of preservation. The impressions are crisp, the clay evenly fired. Some scholars believe it was baked intentionally, perhaps for ritual safekeeping, while others think it may have been accidentally hardened in a palace fire, the same fire that destroyed much of Phaistos in the late Bronze Age. If the disc survived a conflagration, it might have been preserved alongside other now lost artifacts, hinting that it was part of a much larger tradition. Over the last century, the disc has been subjected to every imaginable form of analysis. Linguists have compared its symbols to scripts from Anatolia, Mesopotamia, and even the Indus Valley, but no direct link has been found. Some believe the language could be from a visiting people, a Cretan-Mycenaean hybrid, or even a tongue from far-off lands brought by traders or migrants. Others argue it may not be language at all, but a complex mnemonic device. A kind of ancient cheat sheet for oral storytelling or ritual recitation. There are more speculative, even fringe, interpretations. Some claim the disc is a kind of star map or calendar, its spiral encoding astronomical cycles. Others imagine it as a game board, a tally of goods, or a magical talisman meant to ward off disaster. A few even suggest it might be a clever forgery planted in the early 20th century to spark interest in Cretan archaeology, though microscopic analysis of the clay has largely put that to rest, confirming its Bronze Age origins. Still, mysteries linger. If this was a common object in the Minoan world, why has no other example surfaced in over a century of intensive excavation? Was it a one-off creation, a special commission, perhaps, or the last surviving remnant of a lost archive? And if it is indeed writing, why has it resisted all attempts at decipherment for over 100 years? Modern technology has added tantalizing layers to the puzzle. High-resolution imaging has revealed subtle variations in the symbols, suggesting that multiple seals may have been carved for the same character, hinting at a workshop rather than a lone scribe. Computer models have analyzed symbol frequency and grouping, concluding that the disc's arrangement is too structured to be random, and most likely represents a genuine written language rather than decorative art. Yet even with these advances, the Phaistos Disc remains mute. It sits today in the Heraklion Archaeological Museum, sealed behind glass, its brown-orange surface catching the light, as if daring visitors to crack its code. People still come from all over the world to stand before it, leaning close to trace the spiral with their eyes, wondering what ancient thought, prayer, or command lies hidden in those tiny imprints. Like a whisper from deep time, the disc reminds us that the past is full of voices we can no longer hear, and that some of history's greatest mysteries are not buried in earth, but in the language we've forgotten how to read.